Let me introduce myself. My name is Russell Kahn. I'm the Chief Content and Education Officer with News-O-Matic, and I'm here with a couple of co-hosts who have each participated and helped contribute to the content at News-O-Matic in several ways. So we have Dr. Phyllis Ohr, who is the child psychologist on our team, and we have Grace Leah Njoroge, and I want to make sure that each of them has a quick opportunity to introduce themselves and give a little bit of background into where they're coming from. So Dr. Ohr, if you just want to introduce yourself first.
Sure. Hello, everybody. I've been with News-O-Matic for, well, since it began, and I'm one of the people that the stories that they publish, they give me the chance to first read them and help them with the content. I've been working with children for, I want to say 20 years, but it's probably almost 40 years, but I'll say 20 years. And I, what I do is I try to add insight from the perspective of a child, and also what I know about working with parents and working with families and children, understanding the kind of information that that's helpful for them to hear, how to present it to them, which is why I was asked to be part of this. And I don't know how many of you are from the New York area, but there's a university here called Hofstra University, and I've been on their faculty for over 30 years in a clinical psychology PhD program. So I train students, and I also direct a clinic at the university for children and for parents. So I've been doing that for quite a while.
Thank you, Phyllis. Yeah, Dr. Ohr has been instrumental in helping create the News-O-Matic product from day one, understanding that children have different sensibilities, and we really needed Dr. Ohr's guidance in shaping our content from the get-go. For those of you who don't know, we've been publishing daily editions now for over 9 years, every single weekday without missing a beat. And so we've covered a lot of news over those years. There's always challenges. Now there's a special challenge, but let Grace go ahead and introduce herself briefly too. I see that. Go ahead, Grace.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm an educator. So I found News-O-Matic a couple of years ago. I had the opportunity to write for them a few articles and just begin consulting with them. It's fascinating that, you know, they're putting out all of this content, and I'm always looking for content for my students. I teach reading, writing at the elementary level, coming up on my 10 years in education, and now I'm doing middle school, college and career readiness. So I'm always looking for this type of nonfiction content to give out to students, and they've offered that. I have started delving into social emotional learning and how our students are affected by what's going on in the world, being able to attach that to our content standards that we're doing in the classroom. So thank you guys for joining us for this discussion.
Thank you, Grace. And I think we might have just heard Theo, Dr. Ohr's dog. So there may be some barking in the background, but it's a therapy dog. So it's all part of the SEL experience. So, and just briefly, just to explain, I come from a journalism background, and then I actually spent transitioned my career into education and educational publishing, early elementary, helping to inspire kids to love reading, and especially loving to read nonfiction. That's been my life here. And so News-O-Matic is very much the combination of these two worlds. A lot of times it's a really fun job. You get to, we're writing up articles about scientific discoveries in sports, arts, technology. We try to feature incredible young people doing great work to support their communities. But then there are times when the challenges of our world are pretty significant, and kids are turning to us to help make sense of it. And so with that said, I think we should begin the conversation with the question, should you introduce tough news to your students? And how do you make that decision? Because that's one of the questions I get asked most often as the editor of News-O-Matic. Did you cover this? Did you not cover this? Why? Why not? And there is no formula from my perspective, but I can tell you what shapes our decisions from the editorial team And part of that is we actually give our users, News-O-Matic readers, have an opportunity to ask questions and share comments through our online newsroom. They are the ones who are writing in to say, can you write a story about Ukraine? Can you tell me more about what's happening here? I heard about something scary in the news. Can you help me make sense of it? I mean, they may not say it like that, but they are telling us what they want to hear about. And so, listen, it was never our intention to be the ones to share, to introduce scary news to kids. But it's our mission to help kids feel calm and to make them feel okay about the world and to reduce anxiety. And so, first of all, we hear from kids directly. And also, I'm a parent. My kids are now 12 and 14. I've been seeing them grow up with News-O-Matic. And what's interesting to me now is how much they're seeing on TikTok. My kids are now, like a lot of kids in America, on TikTok. And there's a lot of footage from Ukraine. And so the truth of it is kids are hearing about this. So that's my perspective. I'm curious, Grace, if you want to help explain a little bit about when to introduce some of these discussions into your classroom.
So as an educator, we know that there are always 100 things going on, and that's no exaggeration. So when it comes to these hot topics, when it comes to these difficult conversations, we need to plan for it, right? We don't want to wing it because we know how that can end up spiraling the rest of our day. And Dr. Ohr will speak more about the psychology side of that for kids, but as in a practical sense for us, as educators, we have to plan. If we know, we see on the news, we're getting bombarded with images, messages, is this factual, is this not factual? Come to your students and give them a time frame and say, we are going to talk about this on this day and for this amount of time, so that you're not only prepared, but so are your students. It gives them time to come together and get information. Because when we discuss, when should we talk about these things? The reality is we should talk about these things. When we see big news like this that affects the world, we respect our students enough to understand they're a part of the conversation, right? They can add to the conversation and they need to make sense of what's going on in the world to be excellent scholars and excellent students. So it's when stuff happens, let's make sure that we're prepared to have those conversations with them, especially if it's items that are affecting us on a global scale. We don't really want to push that under the rug as if students, we can just pass it up and they're not going to realize what's going on.
Thank you for that, Grace. I think your class perspective is really important and I appreciate you sharing it. Phyllis, if you want to explain a little bit about how to recognize when a child is ready to have that conversation. What do you look for as a professional in that space?
I know that you have, when the children are together in a class, and then you also have the opportunity as teachers to speak one-on-one and to notice things about your students. So with Grace, I think it's more, what to do with the class. With me, I come in with the concern that there's some children in your class who may be quite upset, quite anxious about it. Students who tend to get upset in general about many of the things going on. I think with the pandemic, it's, their level of not knowing what to expect in their world as the world is changing so radically, they need things to keep them grounded. So some children will react to what's going on internationally and nationally with a high level of anxiety. So the children that are in your class, you might notice some of them are quieter, or some of them are acting out in a way that's disruptive, or some of them are not wanting to come to school. Some of them are sitting in their seat and they're rocking, or they're looking down, and you may have an opportunity one-on-one to say that I've noticed that you seem a little quieter, or you seem to need to move around more. I'm wondering if something is bothering you. So just getting them to hopefully share. But you're noting that there's a change in behavior. You're not necessarily, telling them, don't worry about anything if they start bringing up their concerns, because it's invalidating to hear not to worry about something that clearly I am very much showing you it happens to be upsetting me. So you're looking for the individual student that is showing a behavior change, or again, the student that is anxious, students that are coming up to your desk asking you about what's going on in the world. Will it hurt me? Are they going to drop bombs on me? And being able to acknowledge that you do seem upset and things are scary, and adults are doing things right now to to make things better. So being open about the conversation, not trying to push it away. And Grace said, if everything is out there, the news is out there, trying to shield them from it is not something that's helpful. The same thing with individual children. So I know I could keep talking because there's so much more, but for the most part, when I'm thinking the questions you might have as educators, it's what can I do with individual students that are coming up to me?
Thank you, Phyllis, for explaining some of those tells. I think there's a lot of body language. I wonder if maybe it'll be easier with a lot of classrooms now removing masks to be able to tell how students are feeling. So there's 2 points here. One is whether to introduce this topic, whether to sit down and say, we're going to talk about the situation. And then once you've crossed that threshold, whether these kids are hearing about it on their own, whether this is something that needs to be addressed, then there's the question, how? How do we introduce these difficult news, whether it's Ukraine or something else going on? And I got to tell you, I mean, this is very much why News-O-Matic exists. This was the mission that we wanted to fulfill from day one, giving kids a safe space to understand their world, to make sense of it, and again, not to feel anxious. So from my perspective, I'll just give mine briefly, is whenever we're covering one of these stories, to introduce it, we try to give kids global context. Kids may be hearing Ukraine and may not have a clue where in the world this is. And that actually only adds to the stress because it could be around the corner, it could be nearby. So giving kids context, helping them understand where in the world things are taking place, and then giving them background, to me, arming them with information is going to provide a greater sense of comfort. So that's my perspective in terms of introducing the difficult news. But Phyllis, I'd like to go back to you too and try to get a greater understanding of how can you help ensure that young people feel calm and feel collected during this time when you're introducing these very, very difficult subjects?
Sure. It's probably a word that I don't know if it's overused, but validation is something that is a big piece of communicating with children, that the way you're thinking right now, the concerns that you have, the emotions that you're feeling are all understandable. And there's something that might be confusing. It's confusing because you might not even understand how you're feeling. You just know that it's strong. You could be feeling more than one emotion at a time. So getting children to understand that the way what they're concerned about is understandable. So it's understandable that you're hearing all this news about what's going on in Ukraine. You're hearing news about children in hospitals, and you're telling me, it sounds like what you're telling me is you're scared, and that makes sense. So you're not minimizing what they're feeling. You're trying to reflect back to them using their words. When I'm working with a child, I make sure that I'm not assuming that they're feeling a certain way. I'm listening for what they're telling me they're feeling, and I'm giving it back to them. So I'm thinking, oh, you must, it's scary. But if they're not saying to me, this is something that's scary, I'm going to use more general terms like upset, concern, big emotion, strong emotion, that it makes sense, and that we're going to help you take something that feels big and understand it and make it smaller. And children feeling that adults are in there helping change things is important. They need that bit of hopefulness that there is something that can change in it, and that's something that we would give to them. And also um, they feeling that they can do something also is helpful. That they can contribute in some way. They can try to raise money, or just being told that you can learn more about what's going on in Ukraine and in the world, so they feel in control of it. So again, validating it, the understandability. Many children are feeling this way, and that's really critical as well. They call it normalizing it. That what you're saying to me about your feelings is not unusual at all. So many children are wondering what's going on. It makes sense, and um, and we will work and talk with you and help you understand it better, and in doing so feeling better about it, so you take control of it.
I think that's an important word there, is making sure that students feel in control. And I, I, I think we've got a whole series of key tips that we're going to go over and focus on all the different ways we can do that. But first, I want to ask Grace here. I think there are stories like what's happening in Ukraine, and there have been other events, and there will be more, where it feels like you do need to talk about it with your students. But I don't know very many teachers who say they've got a lot of spare time in their day. And so my question to you, Grace, as a classroom educator, someone who's worked with kids in a classroom setting, how do you make time within the classroom to have these conversations?
That's true. And especially right now for us in my district, it's testing season. So there's a lot going on. So not only is planning important, because it's when this conversation happens. It's usually not if, but when. I would say you got to identify a clear purpose. And my reading teachers out there, we set a purpose for reading, right? But if I know my course material, I know the concepts that I have to teach in my standards, how can I bring this information to my students and connect it to my content standards so that it makes sense that I am using my class time for this? Because we have to navigate a lot of different relationships as well. Relationships with our administration who may come in and do an observation. We don't want to be caught off guard with this unplanned conversation. We have to navigate relationships with our parents who are not going to want us to provide opinions to our students about global affairs. So being able to remove us or teacher ego and all that from the situation and focus on connecting this to content standards, focus on promoting critical thinking. We have standards on speaking and listening. So maybe that looks like you bringing in different articles so that you can identify the author's point of view, so that you are connecting these back to what we have been learning in the classroom, so that not only are you ready, but you're making the learning purposeful, and that you're also allowing that time that after we've done the academic portion of this, we can do the social emotional learning of this that's connected to those speaking and listening standards, of actually having that conversation with each other and making sure that you have those norms, classroom norms set up, because you're going to save a lot of time as a teacher if you have those classroom norms set up, because then you're not doing damage control. You're just having that purposeful conversation with your students, and they all know that expectation, because you're also introducing it when this is already a difficult topic.
Thank you for that perspective, Grace. I think when we started, there were people who weren't certain how news fits into the school curriculum. And I think as we've gone along, further along, and it's pretty clear that news, current events actually has a direct connection, a direct correlation to state and national standards. And it's not like you're taking away 20 minutes of critical ELA to spend it doing something else like discussing Ukraine. It's actually all integrated. We're making really powerful real world connections that these are the stories that are going to really affect our world, and this generation deserves to understand what's going on. So that said, I want to talk about, again, we broke it down into 6 key points that we believe can kind of keep it simple for students. And the first of it addresses what we were just talking about, which is don't hide the topic. It may have been a different situation a generation ago when, if you were a parent in the 80s and there was something that happened in the world and you didn't want your kids to know, you just didn't tell them. It's a different world now. I can tell you that, firsthand with my own kids here. And in my experience, not telling kids what's happening can actually do more harm. So it's sort of this paradox where we think as a parent, as an educator, we are doing a service where we're actually helping young people by not telling them about what's happening. But the truth is, they're hearing about it. They're getting exposed to a lot of information, a lot of misinformation. And without the context, without the adults to help them frame it in a appropriate way and make sense of it, and it's actually scarier. If the grown-ups aren't going to talk to us about this, there's the feeling of what's going on. And again, just to bring it back, this is why we do what we do at News-O-Matic. This is really our mission. Kids deserve a place to turn to make sense of all of this. So I don't know if Dr. Ohr, you had a point about that too, in terms of our first key point about not hiding.
Yeah, as you were talking, I was thinking that the more we make like it's not a, don't worry about it, it's not a problem, the scarier it does get for many children. Again, it's good not to think that every child is a clone, that they're all going to be upset by it. But for those that are, again, many of them are happy, are upset about many things. And when they are not getting their questions answered, when adults are saying, don't worry about it, you don't need to know about it, they're going to build it up, many of them, to something that's even bigger proportions than what is. And it's big enough as it is, but this is something like, my house is going to get bombed, my parents aren't going to come home. And it's been enough change for them with the pandemic, things so very different, that it's understandable that they think these things can actually happen. So not talking about it might actually like make it boom, make it grow. So it's so important to answer the questions and not to try to minimize it. And it's also important to really listen and say, what are they asking me? Because we could give them too much information, and then we can make it even scarier. So what are they asking me about this? To think, what are they asking me? And I'll answer their question and keep it confined, but absolutely not to push it away. Don't worry, things happen, you'll be fine. It doesn't involve you, it's far away from you, because for many of them, that's not what they're thinking, especially those that have more of a personal investment in it. And one thing, you might have children in your class that do have a personal connection, to reach out if other children in the class know, find out from that child how much they would like to share, or how much you would like them to share with the class, for example, just because it's something that might hit home with them. It doesn't mean they want to be the spokesperson for this. They might find that being the center of attention there is actually quite upsetting. And whereas some of them might feel quite comfortable and saying, I will share what's going on. So make sure that you are not assuming that they will want to be connected to this event. Some might feel like, I don't want to be the one. I don't want to be different than other children. I don't want to be the one more affected. And many of them feel very comfortable and say, please, I want to talk about it. It helps me feel better being the spokesperson. So, just get to know and know the children and give them choices as to how they want to be involved in the conversation.
Thank you for that, Phyllis. And again, just to focus on one aspect of what you just said there, the lack of knowledge is actually scarier than the knowledge. It's the unknown. It's building up something in your head because you don't have the information. So again, it seems counterintuitive that you would actually want to share what's going on to help calm down the fears. But I do think that brings us to the next point. Key point number 2, keep it simple. And I have to remind myself of that often because I'm a writer and I like writing and I like telling these stories. But in these cases, we just need to keep it, from a news perspective, keep it as simple as possible, as straightforward as possible. It's okay if the article is 179 words. It doesn't need to go on and on and on and on. I think over-explaining it has the potential to do harm there. So Grace, I don't know if you wanted to add something to that point too, in terms of the simplicity of the information that you're conveying to students.
Yeah. We want to keep it as simple as we want them to keep it simple when we ask them a question, right? And it's okay to say, listen, world politics was not what I wrote my thesis on. I don't have a lot of information on this. That's okay to put our teacher ego aside and say, wow, did my 4th grader really ask me this insightful question? And I have to say, I don't know. It's an opportunity for us to research it together as a class. It's an opportunity for myself and that student to create a connection as we look for answers, and also to make it safe for our kids to hear, I don't know, all the time from adults. And that's important as teachers that we do that, especially when we have these difficult topics because they are large and massive. So keep it simple, stupid is what I tell my students when they're responding to a question that I ask. I want baseline answer. And if necessary, give more time. It's okay if, hey guys, we don't have time for that conversation today. Let's wait till tomorrow to come back to that because I need some time to look it up, and maybe they do too.
Yep, I love that idea. I think those are powerful words. I don't know. We don't have to know everything. Nobody does, and that's part of the process of learning. And it's even the case for teachers and parents.
You also is being up there in front of children and talking about not only this topic but so many topics that have strong emotions associated with it. It makes sense that we feel a strong emotion ourselves, and being aware as you're explaining or answering questions, am I in control of my own emotions? And it's good to show children that we all can get upset, and we also need to show them that if I get upset, I still have a way of making myself feel like I am calmer. And as I explain this topic to you, I'm going to present myself in a way that is calmer, that is in control of the strong feelings. Because if you're as the model, if you're not in control of your strong feelings, then it may make them feel out of control. Because if my teacher is overwhelmed by these feelings, and it also makes sense that we're talking about very emotional topics, strong emotion associated with them, that we are feeling that way. So it's that balance between showing them that we are affected that way, and it makes sense that we are feeling this way, and we also have a way of bringing our own emotions as educators under control, so that the children that we're working with can see that it's okay to have strong emotions, and we also have a capability of bringing those emotions under our control.
I think Grace and Phyllis, you each brought up some really interesting points. And actually, you mentioned, Grace, insightful questions. Well, I thought I would just also remind folks that at the end of our call, which will probably be another about 15 minutes or so, if people have questions that they want, you can actually add them in the chat room here. I'll try to address them. I already see a comment from Adrian. I just wanted to make sure folks knew they can send their questions right there in the chat. You spoke as well, Phyllis, about emotions, strong emotions. And I think as the writers of the articles, our team has to keep our emotions, our feelings completely out of it. And that brings me to my next point, which is keeping it fact-based, keeping it neutral. And I mean, listen, the reason I got into journalism is it's all about honesty. It's here's the information, here's what happened. This is it's supposed to be nonfiction here. This is not you know, a fiction experience. We really want kids to get the facts in a really concrete way. This is not embellishment on these stories. We don't need to over dramatize them. Keeping it neutral and the best of our abilities, at least as the writers, keeping our emotions out of it. So I don't know if either of you wanted to add a final point about this is our third bullet about basically be honest. Just be honest with kids. That's the overarching message there.
I think it's a balance between sharing information and also sharing how you feel about the information, and then showing that the information is so overwhelming that I walk around upset all day. So being being forthright about this, when I hear this, it does upset me. And and when I'm upset, I talk to somebody who I feel comfortable with, so I could share this with. So you're giving them a role model of what to do when they are affected in an overwhelming way by the news. So I think it's to give them the facts, but also to share a little bit of your reaction to the facts, so that they don't feel like they're so very different in getting upset by it. Because my teacher also sometimes feels like crying, or sometimes feels like they need a hug from someone that they care about, someone they feel comfortable with. So I don't know if that quite answers that, but I think your emotions are honest, they're valid. All emotions are valid, and then it's okay for them to feel that way, and you will feel that way. And to add on to it, that there's a way to reach out when you feel that way that will help you, talking to somebody or distracting yourself, listening to music. So being able to be an honest role model.
Right. And I think those 2 points blur, right? I think our key point number 3 was being honest as far as us being the adults, whether through our storytelling, through the articles in News-O-Matic, or as teachers in front of the classroom. But then our 4th point was about recognizing the feelings that students have. And I know, Phyllis, that's always been so critical to you, is making sure that we can acknowledge the reactions that young people may have, and normalizing however they feel. I mean, that's been a valuable lesson for me as a parent. So the lessons learned in News-O-Matic has helped me quite a bit. Grace, I'm not sure if you wanted to add anything in terms of the honesty and neutrality that we need as educators and writers, and also in terms of recognizing the feelings from kids.
So I think it's an opportunity to handle the weight of what it is to be an educator. If I come in and I share my opinions and my conclusions with my students, I have taken away their ability to be presented facts, presented information, and come to their own conclusions. We are raising up critical thinkers, and I want to respect my students enough to be critical thinkers, to process information, have hard conversations, and be able to come to their own conclusions.
Absolutely. Listen, that's the end game here. We want kids to be critical about everything that they experience and see and read. And I think your students have been lucky to have you, Grace, from what you just said. One of the ways that we also want to get kids to be critical thinkers, and another way that we want to acknowledge their feelings, is we want them to be able to express themselves. And so our fifth key point here is about giving kids space to share. And Dr. Ohr was actually the first person that we hired on News-O-Matic when we were starting up about 10 years ago. And one of the key features that we created in News-O-Matic from the beginning was to allow users to share comments and also create drawings and submit their artwork as a reaction, basically making sure they have an outlet and that they feel heard. So we're always featuring kids' drawings and we're always answering their questions. Of course, nothing in real time, it's always vetted. But it's so valuable to let kids comment, ask questions, vote. We have polls. We really want to make sure that they have some way to react. So Grace, I'm not sure if you want to add anything to that as far as the classroom, but I'd love to hear your perspective. How can you ensure that kids feel that they are indeed part of the conversation?
I think number one, just inviting them and straight up telling them what happens in our world. You are here in our world. You're not just a second grade student, an 8th grade student. You are here, you're a citizen, you are part of the conversation, part of the action that we take, and explicitly telling them you also hold the responsibility to research, to know, to come to conclusions, to add to the conversation. And then as far as space, that's really where that planning comes into play of, hey, this is a safe place where we can share. Here are the norms that we have to make sure that no one monopolizes the conversation. And then also, as you know, as the year continues, as teachers, we know we can help our students get to the place where they can say, this is an opinion that my parent holds. I have a different opinion. This person, my uncle, thinks this, I think that, and helping them understand it's okay to have all of those differences of opinions and to hold space for other people even in our lives that are not thinking the same way that we are. And then we in turn help them create space and hold space for people to have difficult conversations.
That's valuable. Thank you, Grace, for explaining all that. And then our sixth and final key point here is about making sure that kids have opportunities to take action. And I think sharing is part of that, right? I mean, expressing yourself, drawing art, there's lots of different ways that kids can react to a story, but there's also a lot of action beyond that. And every one of our articles has a little act button, and we really want to make sure kids understand how to continue the conversation even beyond the article or beyond the classroom. This is all part of global citizenship. This is about getting kids involved, understanding that they have a role to play in their community. So I don't know if, Phyllis, if you have any points about making sure that we can help make kids feel more empowered to take action in an effort to get them to be more empowered peacemakers, right? Bringing it back to Ukraine, how can you help these kids be peacemakers?
Okay. Again, sorry for the dog, out of my control. Yeah, I find that it fits the child the way they want to get involved. So you have some that right away want to go out, start creating something, selling something, raising money, writing things, so many things. so many ways to, express themselves, organizing people to do a march. But and that's one way. Another way is just giving them the information that you count and learning about it so that you can contribute to other conversations, so that you could understand what's going on there aside from what you're getting every day out there. Just reading books about children in Ukraine, children in internationally, learning about it to be a global citizen is something that you could do. And some children are really drawn to that more than getting involved and making something and selling something. Others are more, I want to contribute, but I'm not the type to put myself out there. So giving them the information, that just learning about it, and just asking me questions about it is doing something that you can contribute that way. So that's very important.
So I do recognize we're running up to our 45-minute window here, so I want to be respectful of that. I'm going to open a can of worms real quick, just because it's worth bringing up, even though it requires its own webinar. This current crisis in Ukraine is an opportunity to teach young people about news literacy and media literacy, given the absolute bombardment of misinformation and disinformation coming from all avenues. I mean, we've got an incredible amount of we're not using the word fake news anymore, but it's, kids need help sorting it out. We just did a whole major story about this. We worked with the folks at News Literacy Project to help develop some tips for young students to help them make sense of the information and evaluate its credibility. Again, this is a whole different webinar, so I feel badly opening up this can of worms now, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this, because obviously some of those pieces of misinformation, they're designed by nature to create a reaction, to create a sense of fear. So this all ties back into how to speak to kids about Ukraine. Part of it is making sure what they know, what they see, and what they read is credible. So as we begin to wrap up here, I just also want to talk about how do we move forward, right? Let's say you're able to carve 20 minutes on a Wednesday afternoon with your classroom. You've had that discussion. And first of all, I guess, Grace, I'm looking to you because you've got a lot of classroom experience. How do we keep that conversation contained, right? How do we keep it from spiraling out of control? And then ultimately, how do we decide when to close that loop and move on? And then after that, we'll have to return to, how do we know whether we have to return to it? But let's start with you, Grace. How do we contain?
I would say that this is a time, yes, we know as teachers, we have lessons plans, we have those checks and balances set up by administration in that process. But this is definitely a time to put our teacher ego aside. If you know that, hey, this classroom needs this conversation, but they're not so great with the norms, and you have a mentor teacher that you can lean on, or you have some resources of people that you can lean on. Maybe it's your history teacher who did major in world politics. This is the time to reach out and bring in that help, and also be honest with our students. We are gonna have 45 minutes for this conversation, students, during our block schedule time. We cannot go over that 45 minutes. Tell them in advance. If you are saying something and we're coming up on the end of that time, I'm going to stop you, and then we're going to discuss as a class, because maybe you and that student just need that one-on-one, but I open it up to my class and it's just a really quick, simple, do we need to continue this conversation, class? Or are we at a resolve right here? And at this point of the year, our students are usually more open with us of yes or no, I don't want to, I'm at a resolve right here. And then schedule that time, because this is also developing news. It's a time to show kids, hey, things are going to change. Maybe even your conclusions about these issues will change, right? It's going to happen over time. So as an educator, I know I don't need one 30-minute block. I need maybe 4 or 5. And maybe we look at this at the top of March and we come back to this at the end of March or the top of April to see what has developed from there. So give yourself some realistic timeframes and goals in your planning.
That's fantastic. And then, like, as we're at the end of our 45-minute window here, I do want to ask Phyllis a final question, because I think, listen, we're all educators in our own ways. We're all working with kids in different ways. What should we be on the lookout for, Phyllis? In your experience, 30 years as a child psychologist with a specialty in early, in development, early education, what should we look for if we should be raising a red flag? Meaning, when do we worry about needing further intervention for some of our students, and what do we do then?
Well, I'm hoping that if you do have children in the class that you have continued concerns about, that you have some communication with the parents, and you could together understand that a child might be so upset about the news that they're starting to change in some way that is making their quality of life not as good as what it used to be. The child that doesn't want to go out with friends anymore, the child that doesn't want to go to dinner, the child that is reacting by yelling and screaming or cursing or hitting. So there's so many different expressions, and it doesn't have to be one type of behavior that they're showing. They could show disruptive, angry behaviors, and also seem quite sad and withdrawn. So you're looking, though, is this a change? And again, it could be a child you're concerned about, and it's a more dramatic change now. They're not sleeping well, they're not eating well. They come to class, they're tired. They come to class, and the friends they used to have, they're not connected with anymore. And it could be children that you've noticed they seem very well functional in the classroom, and now they're not anymore. Something is different. And change to me is critical, and I don't want to excuse it. Well, there's just a lot of things going on. I want to know, I do notice, that there's a change in you. It would be helpful for me if there, is something there that you would want me to be aware of, that we talk about it, because part of my relationship with you is to help you feel better about things. So to be very open with them, that I notice some things are a little different, and I would not just wait and wait, because parents are sometimes so confused. Like, my child, is fine at home, but now you're saying for the last 4 months you've noticed this in school. They're different at home. We need to connect. So hopefully feeling comfortable connecting with parents, and also connecting with the child and saying, I notice this. It would be helpful for me if you could tell me a little bit more. Sometimes they might not know what's going on. So saying, tell me what's going on, they might say nothing's going on. It might be that they just don't understand, and they don't know how to tell you. So to give them information that it's okay if you don't know, and I've still noticed something. I want to find a way to understand what is going on. So not to ignore it. But behavior changes is one of the earliest signs that something's different here. Something's happened. It could also be some kind of trauma that they themselves have undergone, but they're different. And that's a wake-up call for us adults. Like, they're not, let's not explain it away. Let's try to connect and understand it better.
Well, we'll certainly keep that in mind as we continue to watch the students in our lives and see how they react. We'll keep doing our work at News-O-Matic to help inform and educate young people, while hopefully making them feel safe and secure at the same time. And I'm very grateful to everybody on this call, not only for joining us this afternoon, but for all that you do. I mean, the fact that you joined here, you want to know better, you want to understand how to better support your students. So on behalf of all the kids in your lives and all that you do, thank you. Thank you for what you do. It's incredibly important. So if there's no other questions or no other comments that folks wanted to share, because I'm not seeing too much in here. Yeah, thank you. So have a great afternoon. We'll send you a link if you guys want to download or share any information here from this webinar. And if you want to get in touch, my name, I'm russ@news-o-matic.org. I can put that in the chat as well. But thank you so much for all that you do. This is a critically important time for kids, and I know it's been a challenging time for teachers too. So thank you for all that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
It's been
Thank
very
you.
So glad. Sorry, I'm in New
Thank
York.
you. I have a question, Ross.
Yes.
I'm a school guidance counselor. I was wondering if you're planning on doing something just for parents. Parents are really, really, needing to have some support out there, and I've had a hard time finding information for them.
I actually do a lot with parents. We run parenting groups. I'm thinking just personally, I also know of other ways to have parents meet. We do a lot actually via Zoom. We find that we get a lot of parents who can attend. Having to come in somewhere is difficult, but there must be resources out there. I jump in with what I know because we work a lot with parents. In my group, I have doctoral students that are in training, and part of what they do is do research and do work with getting parents to understand more about how to talk to their children, how to have effective communication, how to problem solve with their children, how to learn what the fine art of validation and what invalidation is. So there's just so much out there. But yes, I agree. There should be. I don't know if Russ wants to put something together, but certainly there parents do really need to be part of the conversation. So.
Yeah, we've done webinars before, you and I, Dr. Ohr, about that. But we've been obviously trying to make sure that teachers can support their students, especially since News-O-Matic is a very prominent classroom tool now. But I think there's value in maybe having a follow-up conversation just for the parents. Obviously, a lot of the same tips apply.
Absolutely, yeah. I didn't have a chance to send it out to my parents. I'm sorry, I wasn't sure, but I would have, when the recordings come, I'll do that.
Absolutely, we'll send that out as soon as we've got a link here.
One of the biggest, I guess the most asked about group is stress regulation in parents. How can I deal with my stress? Because I'm trying to work, I'm trying to be there as a parent for my children, and I am so stressed. So having groups that teach parents how to manage their own stress, the stress tolerance, emotion regulation, those are all so important. And teachers too, me too.
Well,
yeah, and teachers too, absolutely.
I was going to say, with that said, folks, take care of yourselves.
Thank you.
Do what you need to do to stay calm and collected yourselves, and then that way, all of our students can benefit from us. So thank you everybody for your time this afternoon. I'll follow up with an email so that you can share this recording with anybody else who might want it.
Take care.
It was a pleasure getting to know you.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.